Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really digging into something fascinating, the perspectives on the World Christian Movement course. We're looking at its origins, its impact, mainly using Yvonne Wood Honeycutt's work, launching a movement of the perspectives.
It's a great resource for this.
Yeah, so our goal really is to figure out how this one course ended up shaping so much evangelical thought on missions and, how it still influences things globally. Some surprising starts in there, too.
Absolutely. It's kind of amazing when you think about it, a course, usually academic, becoming this real engine for change and how people practically engage. It's less textbook learning, more like a fundamental shift.
Okay, yeah, let's jump right in. I have to say, my own experience kind of reflects what a lot of people seem to go through with this, like even coming from a strong church background, seminary even, hitting some of these ideas is a real aha moment. It's like, whoa, the picture is much bigger than I thought.
That's such a common reaction to that feeling of surprise. Like, hang on, there's more here. Honeycutt really points out how widespread that is. Students, professionals, even, experienced missionaries having their view totally transformed.
And it wasn't small scale either. Launched back in '74, right? And it's touched tens of thousands globally over decades. Plus, the reader itself, the book, has had this whole other life in colleges and seminaries.
Huge reach.
It's pretty incredible for one initiative.
Totally. And it's important to remember Ralph Winter's perspective on this, the guy who really drove it. He didn't see it as creating something totally new out of thin air. He felt it was joining something God was already doing, tapping into a current that was already flowing.
Right. So to get that, we need to step back. What was the vibe around missions before 1974? My sense is things were pretty shaky. Lots of questions.
Oh, absolutely. Shaky is a good word. I mean, the dominant feeling in the 60s, surprisingly, was kind of like the day of the missionary is over.
Really?
Well, you had these national churches popping up and growing strong in many countries. So the thinking was, okay, the Great Commission, the way we thought about it, maybe it's kind of done. The job now is just supporting those local churches.
Huh.
Yeah, and some of those younger churches were even say, hey, maybe hold off on sending more Western missionaries for a while. A moratorium, they called it.
Wow. That's a massive shift. What drove that?
A big piece was the post-World War II political landscape. Colonial empires were dissolving super fast. New nations were independent. And sometimes, let's be honest, missionaries were seen as linked to the old colonial powers.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Baggage. Exactly. So as these new countries were finding their feet, sometimes outside missions felt suspect.
And it wasn't just politics, right? Stuff was happening in the West, too.
Oh, definitely. The 60s in the U.S., you had huge social unrest, Vietnam, this growing disillusionment with, well, everything established, a feeling that maybe traditional Christianity was losing its grip.
Secularism was on the rise.
Yeah, secular ideas were really starting to shape public life, schools, government. That impacted theology, too.
Yeah.
Like the World Council of Churches meeting in Bangkok in '73, they defined salvation largely in, socioeconomic terms, as worldly stuff.
Which clashed with the traditional evangelical focus on personal conversion.
Big time. It created this tension, and perspectives later really tried to, recenter that biblical mandate.
So even within Christianity, there were these different currents pulling people.
For sure. Liberation theology was emerging, especially in Catholic circles, focusing on freeing people from oppression, sometimes using Marxist ideas. That caused splits. And then just generally the world was shrinking, right?
Technology, travel.
Exactly. Travel, trade, communication, immigration, all bringing different cultures and religions face to face in the West like never before. Pluralism. And that made holding on to this idea of one exclusive religious truth harder for some people.
Okay, so putting it all together, national churches rising, decolonization, social upheaval, secularism, pluralism, theological debates. It paints a picture where missions were kind of unpopular, especially with young people.
That's it, exactly. By the late 60s, early 70s, there was real skepticism in American churches, especially among evangelical students. There was this 1970 article in Evangelical Missions Quarterly.
Yeah.
It summed up student views of missions as out of it, drab, inflexible, not personal, not even successful. People were asking, Why are we exporting our church structures when they have their own churches now?
Sounds like a real low point. So
Yeah.
how did we get from that to something like perspectives? What turned the tide?
Well, interestingly, amidst all that questioning, you also had the Jesus movement bubbling up.
Right, the late 60s, early 70s, spiritual revival among youth.
Exactly. A real focus on personal faith, new energy. And that started to subtly shift things, even if people were still wary of institutions.
And did that energy spill over into mission somehow?
It seems like it did. The Urbana 70 Missions Conference, run by InterVarsity, attendance was way up unexpectedly, showed there was this underlying interest, even with the skepticism. And then critically, the planners for the next one, Urbana 73, they made a very deliberate choice. They decided, let's be positive about missions. Let's focus on God's big plan, his purpose for everyone.
And that hit differently.
It really resonated. You saw conservative evangelicals getting more interested, more committed. Missiology itself, the study of missions, was growing up, getting more academic. The William Carey Library started publishing mission books.
Yeah.
It was building.
But Urbana 73 itself sounds like the real flashpoint for perspectives.
Totally. The student response there, when they gave the call for people to commit to missions, it was stunning, way beyond what anyone expected.
Compared to Urbana 70.
Oh, night and day. Huge numbers at 73, and even more at 76, made real commitments to explore missions. It felt like a turning point for a whole generation of students moving away from that negativity.
And Ralph Winter saw this wave of enthusiasm at Urbana 73 and felt like, we need to do something with this.
Exactly. He saw the potential for a new student volunteer movement, like the ones that sent out tons of missionaries a century earlier. He worried that if this passion wasn't channeled, educated, it might just fizzle out.
So he went to InterVarsity, the Urbana organizers.
Yeah, he proposed a follow-up course. David Howard, the Urbana director, was kind of swamped, right after the conference.
Sure.
So there was some initial hesitation, resources, staffing. But Winter was so convinced, he basically said, look, just give me the names of the interested students. I'll run the course myself if I have to.
Wow. Determined.
Very. And Howard, to his credit, even though maybe hesitant, gave Winter 5 key questions. Kind of a reality check.
Like what?
The basics. Who's going to teach it? What's the curriculum? Where will it be? Who's sponsoring it? How's it funded? Practical hurdles.
Okay.
But Winter, remarkably, came back with solid answers to all 5 in just 2 weeks.
2?
Yeah. Which I think surprised Howard, but also showed Winter wasn't messing around.
Clearly. So with those basics sorted, he moved fast to set up this summer course. What was the big idea behind it?
He wanted it to offer academic credit, make it accessible for students, but the deeper goal was to get students thinking about the total task of world evangelization, not just should I be a missionary, but understanding their part in God's massive plan for all peoples.
Seeing it from God's perspective, as he put it.
Exactly. That was an early motto. Every major decision you make will be faulty unless you see it from God's perspective. Pretty strong stuff.
And his own kids played a role in his motivation.
Yeah, he mentioned being struck that his own college-age daughters didn't really know basic mission history like who William Carey was.
Huh.
It made him realize even committed Christian families might lack this broader understanding. That personal concern really fueled him.
So how did SIIS, the Summer Institute of International Studies, actually get off the ground for Summer 74?
He pulled together a small board, mostly mission folks from around Wheaton, Illinois. They planned it for the Wheaton College campus. The format, this intensive summer thing, was modeled on Wycliffe's SIL program, which Winter knew firsthand.
But getting students wasn't easy at first.
No. InterVarsity didn't promote it much since it wasn't their program directly. Only a couple signed up through them. So Winter went into overdrive.
Oh.
Got it mentioned on Billy Graham's radio show, convinced Christianity Today to run a full-page ad and an article. And get this, he had his daughters call students from the Urbana list personally.
Wow, grassroots.
Totally. And it worked. They got 29 students for that first summer.
And the format was unusual too, right? Different professor each week?
Yeah, that kind of happened by accident. They tried to get one main dean, Herbert Kane, but found lots of the top professors they wanted could only spare a week here or there. So, boom, new professor each week.
Did that work?
Kane worried it might be disjointed, but actually, students loved it. Got exposed to tons of different experts. The main trick was just making sure they didn't get slammed with 6 term papers due at the end.
Right. So what was it like for those first 29 students at Wheaton in 74? Sounds intense.
Incredibly immersive. The professors lived in the dorms with them. So you had lectures, but also meals together, afternoon study, then evening sessions where professors or visiting missionaries just shared their stories.
Wow.
Bruce Graham, one of those first students, talks about literally going running with Arthur Glasser, a major missiologist, and just feeling like they were part of something new, a real student movement starting.
And smack in the middle of that first SIIS, Winter takes off for Lausanne, the big missions congress in Switzerland.
Yeah, huge moment. That trip, and specifically the talk he gave at Lausanne 74, was utterly game-changing. Not just for him, but for, like, the whole direction of evangelical missions globally.
What was so revolutionary about his talk?
He basically stood up and, building on McGavran's work, introduced this idea of unreached people groups. He called them hidden peoples at first.
Isn't how?
He challenged the idea that because there were churches in almost every country, the job was almost done. He used examples like India, Indonesia, showing that within those countries were tons of distinct groups, different languages, cultures, totally cut off from the existing churches by those barriers.
So the national churches couldn't easily reach them.
Exactly. Reaching them, he argued, needed a specific, intentional, cross-cultural effort. It wasn't going to happen just through the local churches nearby.
And this is where E1, E2, E3 comes in.
Precisely. E1 is evangelism in your own culture. Easy enough, what most churches do. E2 is crossing some barriers, maybe a different social class, nearby region. E3 is the big leap, different language, vastly different culture. Winter hammered home that while E1 is vital, the church globally had massively under-resourced E2 and especially E3 efforts. Most people simply had no access to the gospel in a way they could understand. He talked about the huge Muslim world, the Hindu world, and called the church's lack of awareness people blindness.
People blindness. That's a powerful phrase. Must have ruffled some feathers.
Oh, definitely. It was controversial at first, lots of debate at Lausanne, but the logic, the data, it slowly sank in. It forced a massive rethink of mission goals, strategies. Years later, big mission agency leaders were saying, yeah, Lausanne 74 and the unreached peoples idea Winter pushed. That changed everything.
He kept pushing it right after Lausanne.
Relentlessly. Speaking, writing, using charts, stats. He'd show data on, say, India, how much effort went to existing Christians versus these unreached groups, or how few workers there were in the entire Muslim world compared to its size.
Wow.
And all that analysis, that passion, led directly to him proposing a major new center focused specifically on these unreached peoples, which became the U.S. Center for World Mission.
So you have this energy from SIIS, this paradigm shift from Lausanne. How did the early SIIS students carry that forward?
They went back fired up. People like Bruce and Christy Graham started mission fellowships on campuses, helped launch the student conferences on world evangelization SCARO. The 75 ISIS group even went to Guatemala, dreaming about starting mission communities focused on unreached peoples, inspired by books like Committed Communities. That led to the Fellowship of World Christians.
And new people got drawn in, like David Bryant.
Yeah, David Bryant read a Winter article, got involved with SIIS, and really ran with it. He coined the term World Christian, this idea that every Christian has a role in God's global plan. Wrote the book In the Gap. He was national coordinator for SIIS for a bit, helped shape the curriculum. Even when he moved to InterVarsity, that SIISifiler influence stuck with him.
And the curriculum itself was still evolving then. Not quite the perspectives we know.
Right. Early SIIS was more like a curated collection of readings, articles, book excerpts. The Lausanne papers from 74 were a big source. It wasn't until 76 that Peter Wagner pulled together a more formal textbook, Crucial Dimensions in World Evangelization.
For Moody Bible Institute.
Yeah, Moody asked for it, but then didn't actually use it. But it became foundational for SIIS, which by then was called ISIS Institute of International Studies.
Okay, so ISIS, the evolved ISIS, finds a home at the new U.S. Center for World Mission. That sounds like a big step.
Huge. Ralph and Roberta Winter founded the USCWM in 76, this audacious faith venture, buying the old Point Loma College campus in Pasadena. And guess who staffed it initially?
A lot of those early SIIS alumni.
You got it. Their lives were changed by the course. Now they're building this center together. And running ISIS was a core part of the USCWM's mission right from the start.
And the curriculum kept developing. I see Understanding World Evangelization, or UWE, mentioned.
Yep, UWE came after Urbana 76, kind of a follow-up resource. Same core team, Wagner, Glasser, Winter, Hybert. It was designed more for independent study, small groups, used a study guide with other key books. And significantly, that powerful talk John Stott gave at Urbana 76, The Living God is a Missionary God.
Yeah.
That became chapter 1 of what would eventually be the Perspectives Reader.
Ah, okay. And this was where Steve Hawthorne comes in more prominently.
Exactly. Steve took the UWE course by correspondence, was blown away, moved to the USCWM campus, joined the Haggai community there. He started playing a massive role in collecting readings, shaping the curriculum, especially the biblical section, when SIIS expanded to a full semester course in '79.
And then they tried taking it on the road, the Penn State Extension course in 1980.
Yeah, that was a big test. Could this work outside Pasadena? It showed the potential was huge, but also threw up some unexpected challenges. There's a story about Ralph Winter's travel getting totally messed up, needing divine intervention just to get there.
Classic mission story.
Right. But the impact was undeniable. Bob Sjogren, who started Frontiers, he came out of that class. Fran Pat, who started the first USCWM regional office. Same class.
Wow.
But it also made them realize, okay, the full ICE curriculum is kind of clunky for this extension format. We need something more portable, more user-friendly.
Which led to the Perspectives Reader and Study Guide.
Directly. And Steve Hawthorne was absolutely central to that massive job, pulling it all together, organizing it. The focus shifted from trying to get full semester ICE programs everywhere to creating this powerful, condensed one-semester course anyone could take.
And the name? Perspectives on the World Christian Movement.
That came from Jay Gary, another person involved. And because Hawthorne had done so much of the heavy lifting on the reader, Winter made a surprise call and named him co-editor alongside himself. Winter was clear. The team, especially Steve, really chose most of the content.
This has been a huge undertaking. How was it received when it was nearly done?
Really well. They shared drafts with respected mission professors in the summer of '81, got rave reviews.
And there was that interesting debate about Walter Kaiser's view on Abraham.
Oh, yeah. Kaiser argued the Abrahamic covenant God promising to bless all nations through Abraham was the original Great Commission. Winter loved it, felt it was foundational.
But not everyone agreed.
Nope. It challenged some traditional views, sparked debate. But Winter pushed for it, felt it was crucial for understanding the whole Bible story of mission, and it's stuck. It's become a really key, thought-provoking part of the course.
So finally, Urbana 81, the reader is officially launched, the course gets its name, and it's ready to spread. Quite a journey.
8 years, from that spark at Urbana 73 to the launch at Urbana 81. Vision, persistence, overcoming obstacles. Winter always stressed, though. It wasn't just human effort. He really believed it was the Holy Spirit driving it, and they were just trying to keep up, you know?
So looking back now, what's the lasting legacy? What's the future?
Well, people point to different things. David Bryant highlights its strong focus on Christ and hope. Arthur Glasser emphasized the way it teaches inductive Bible study, digging into Scripture yourself. Winter felt its real power was the Spirit working through the people involved, creating this awe of God.
And it's still going strong.
Oh, yeah. Perspectives keeps expanding, North America globally through the Perspectives Global Office, adapting to new languages, cultures. The big question now is, how will it continue to evolve? How will it shape the global church, which is now active everywhere in the coming years?
It really is amazing. One idea born from that moment at Urbana growing into the global movement.
It really is. Shows what can happen with clear vision, dedication, and maybe a willingness to adapt when things get messy.
So for you listening, what do you take away from this deep dive? Hopefully a better sense of the history behind a lot of current mission thinking, understanding where these ideas came from.
Yeah, and maybe it prompts a question for you personally. Think about your own journey. What were your aha moments, times your perspective really shifted? And maybe how can you plug into God's global purposes right where you are? Consider what unreached areas might exist, not just far away, but maybe in your own community, your workplace, even in your own understanding. It's a reminder that God's mission is always unfolding and there's always more to see.